teachers and the government of the student body who fund these events, and for all the other sponsoring agencies and organizations, and there are a number of them that have been listed on our publicity, too numerous to list. It's kind of strange, actually, but our speaker tonight, Dr. Barbara Love, and I have lived in the same town for over probably 20 years. And it wasn't until I came to Iowa, and I had been here for 3 years, that I heard her speak publicly. Excuse me, I've heard her speak, but not publicly. The first time I heard Barbara was with some of you in Iowa City at the Women Against Racism conference. And at that time I thought, yo, homegirl, do we need your message here in Ames? Somehow, yo, home woman didn't make it. So needless to say that I was delighted to hear that the Committee on Women was bringing her here. And also a special bonus, and I didn't know for a long time, but another friend of mine, Joan Lester, who is the executive director of the Equity Institute, she's sitting there, also came, offering their perspectives on a subject that may prove to be one of the keys to dealing with a world in which understanding and acceptance of others different from ourselves will determine whether as a people we thrive or survive, really. Barbara is an associate professor of multicultural organizational development at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. She is a member of the National Training Laboratories and the Association for the Study of Training and Development. She's also a consultant for the Equity Institute, and that's why she's here. She has worked internationally with a number of organizations throughout the world, in North America, the Caribbean, Europe, and East Africa. Dr. Love's most recent research and publications examine the experiences of women and people of color within organizations. Please welcome with me, give a warm welcome to Dr. Barbara Love. Doesn't she have a great name?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming out to join us this evening. Welcome to this. This is the first year of the last decade of the 20th century. Did I get that right? Welcome. The 21st century is on its way, and we get to usher it in. And it reminds me that this is, in fact, a very, very exciting historical millennium in which to be alive. Have you thought about that lately? How wonderful it is to be alive at this particular time in history. Have you thought about it lately? Well, take a minute now and think about it. Turn to the person sitting next to you and tell them, this is a wonderful time to be alive. Tell them. Tell them. It's a wonderful time to be alive. It's a wonderful time to be alive for all sorts of reasons, but one of the reasons that I get really, really, really excited about is that we get a chance to be the people in history who actually figured out how to make multiculturalism a reality in our organizational lives, in our personal lives, in our society. Isn't that exciting? Don't you say yes? Yes. Don't you think that's fun? Yes. No, wait. Let's start over. Thank you, Carly, for that wonderful introduction. Let's start. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. There is one thing that Carly failed to mention. She didn't tell you that I was raised Southern Baptist. Now, are there any other Southern Baptists in the room? Not a one. That means I can say anything I want to. Now, I'm going to tell you something about Southern Baptists. I was raised Southern Baptist. That's part of my background. That's part of my culture. And it means that there are certain kinds of behaviors and expectations that I carry with me because I was steeped in a Southern Baptist tradition. Now, let me tell you, this coming Sunday morning, there's going to be this process that's going to go on in every Southern Baptist church. I'll guarantee it. And it's been going on for quite a long time. And I call it the call-response routine. What that means is that somebody in the church is going to say something. It might be the minister, it might be a deacon, it might be the mother of the church, it might be a member of the congregation, anybody. But somebody's going to say something, and when they say something, they're going to wait. And they're waiting for what? A response. The response could be amen. It could be yes, Lord. It could be shut up. It could be, actually, I heard my grandfather say to a minister, that's not in the Bible. You're lying. Sit down and shut up. And the minister did. So I know it could be any kind of response. But the point is, part of my tradition is that I say something and then I wait for a response. So if you would oblige me this evening as we talk about diversity and multiculturalism, let me start over. Don't you think this is a wonderful time to be alive? Yes! Because we get a chance to make it real. We get a chance to make it happen. We live now in a society that was founded on the most wonderful kinds of principles. These people had a vision. They had a vision about equity and fraternity and justice and brotherhood, about the participation of all kinds of people in this new social order. That was a wonderful vision. And they wrote it down. They put it in the documents that organized this society, that organized this government. Unfortunately, they couldn't figure out how to make it real. They couldn't figure out how to put it into practice. They couldn't figure out how to build it into, in a practical way, the institutions which they developed, into the society which they developed. And so they said, we are a country, we are a society, we are a group of people founded on certain principles that all, what? Men. Yeah, so everybody can participate if you are a man, okay? And everybody's equal if you are white. And everybody can participate on an equal basis if you are propertied. And everybody could participate from a position of equity if you were presumed to be heterosexual. And everybody could participate on an equal basis if you were 21. So there were certain limitations to what they could actually implement in practice, but the vision was there. And the vision has come to us along with this kind of fractured duality, I call it, and we are probably the first people in history who have not only the vision, but we also have the resources to make it real. We have the resources to make it real. We have the know-how to make it real. We have the information to make it real. And we have the will to do it. And that makes this a particularly exciting time. I talk about it a lot. I was talking to a group not very long ago, and I was saying what an exciting time it is to be alive and to get to participate in this great experiment, because just think, we could have gotten born in the middle of the next century when it would be all over. You know? And then we'd have to ask our grandparents to tell us about the olden times when you all used to struggle for justice. You know? Or I said, I could have gotten born a half century ago. And then I remembered that I was. So I said, well, I could have gotten born a century ago. You know, back there when we still dreamt about it, we still held it out as an ideal, but we couldn't, you know, people say, in my children's lifetime. You've heard people say that. Well, it won't happen in my lifetime, but in my children's lifetime. Well, we're the ones in our own lifetime, we get a chance to make it happen. And so that's one reason I'm very, very happy to share this time and to share this space and to share this agenda with you this afternoon about making a multicultural university. Because making or moving toward a multicultural university means that we take into account certain sets of issues. We know that it's an organizational issue. We also know that it's a personal issue. There are certain sets of dynamics in our own lives, in our individual and personal lives, as well as in our organizational lives that we get a chance to grapple with. We get a chance now to figure out what are the sets of attitudes, what are the sets of understandings, what are the pieces of information, and what are the specific skills that we will need to be able to make multiculturalism a reality in our organization, in our university. We get a chance to reflect on what is it that I know now, and what is it that I need to learn in order to make this a reality? Now, sometimes people raise questions about how real this is. Sometimes people ask me, well, is this multiculturalism really just a fad that will soon blow over? That people will stop talking about in a few years because, right now it's hot. Everybody's on the bandwagon, but do you think it will blow over? And so I say, well, my answer to that question depends on the answer that you give me to several questions. For instance, I ask people, do you think that women came into the workplace, came into the organization because they were tired of being at home, sitting up on their pedestal, fanning themselves and doing nothing, and they just got bored and they wanted to come out and see what was going on in the university? Do you think that's why they're here? Say yes or no or something. No. Well then, do you think that there's going to come a period pretty soon when women are going to say, okay, we saw what people were doing out here, it doesn't interest us very much, and so we're going to go on back home and crawl back up on our pedestal and sit there? Is that going to happen? No, it's not going to happen. In fact, few of us were ever on a pedestal in the first place. Yeah, we were at home working. And some of us may have, as they showed on the television in the early part of the last decade, not us, but some women, mopping their kitchen floor in their high heels and pearls. How many of you remember your mother mopping the kitchen floor in her high heels and pearls? Did your mother do that? I used to watch Mrs. Cleaver, and I said, I wonder if that's what white women do. I wanted to know. I couldn't figure it out, and I didn't have anybody to ask because I couldn't get to Miss Cleaver. So I still ask people that. I'm looking for somebody who actually did that. But no, we weren't at home up on a pedestal. We were at home working. Or, in the case of women of color, we were out in the workplace working. And so we're not going away. And we're not going to cease or even let up on our demand, our insistence that our participation be from a position of equity. And then I ask questions like this. How many of you think that people of color just were curious about what was going on over here in the university where the white people were, and they really wanted to get admitted so they could just find out what was going on? And that now that they have a glimpse of what's going on, they're going to go back wherever they were. Is that going to happen? It's not going to happen. And Workforce 2000 gives us some demographics about the nature of the workplace in the next century that tells us that multiculturalism is a fact of our lives. It is not a whether I would like it. It is not a nice to have. It's a fact of history. And nobody we know yet has been able to put out their hand and stop the face of history, stop the tide of history. History is. It will arrive. And the question to us is whether we will manage it or whether it will manage us. That's the question available to us. And so in our answer to this question, because your presence here indicates to me that you have decided that the answer is we will choose to manage that history. We know that it can happen, and we know that it can be managed well. It can be managed in a way that is beneficial to all of the people in the process and to the organization as well. We simply have to figure out what we need to know in order to make that happen. Now, how do we go about figuring out what it is that we need to know in order to make that happen? What are the pieces of information we need to acquire? What are the skills that we need to develop? Well, one way to do that is to look at what do we already know about multiculturalism. Because I do say that we can't do what we don't know. We can't implement what we don't have the information or the skills or the understandings about. And so let's take a look for a moment at what it is that we already know about multiculturalism. Let me ask you to go through a little exercise with me that will give us a glimpse of our own multicultural profile. Now, you're going to need a pencil and a piece of paper for this. So if you don't have a pencil, would you borrow one from a neighbor? I'll do it. Yeah, do it. Some of you have done it before, but that's all right. Do it again. It's always fun to do. It's always fun for me to do. I'll do it while you do it. If you're all set, I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and you get to write down some numbers. And at the end of this, I'm going to do a precise statistical survey of our multicultural life experience, and then see what kind of conclusions we can draw from that. Now, let me ask you, on a scale of 10 being completely multicultural to 1 being completely monocultural, I'd like you to rate the level of multiculturalism of the major organizations of your life. Now, I'm going to call off some organizations. You may think of others as we go along, but let me list some. And you have a question. When I say rate the level of multiculturalism, you want to know how are you going to rate it? What are the criteria you're going to use? What definition am I giving? Use your own definition here. Use whatever criteria comes to your mind when you think multiculturalism in the organization. And now, let's look at each of the major organizations of your life. Let's begin with your family. Write down a number indicating the level of multiculturalism of your family. This is your family of origin, the family that you grew up in. On a scale of 10 to 1, 10 being completely multicultural, 1 being completely monocultural. Okay? Family. Now let's say neighborhood. Let's consider that an organization and give it a number. The neighborhood that you grew up in. Now let's add your religious organization, church, synagogue, temple, mosque, whatever your religious organization. What was the level of multiculturalism? Now let's add your nursery school. Can you remember that? Your nursery school. How multicultural was your nursery school? Now let's add your elementary school. How multicultural was your elementary school? Now, let us add your junior high. Give it a number. Let us add your senior high. Give it a number. Let us add any social or civic organizations that you might have been a member of at that time, your Brownies, Scouts, Cubs, Twinkies, those organizations. Okay, give it a number. And let's add your college or university. What's the level of multiculturalism? If you've had any jobs or work experience, you could add that as an organization. What was the level of multiculturalism? And then on the next line, you can pick your own favorite organization and rate the level of multiculturalism of that organization. Now, let's do this survey. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you had, let's see, I listed 9 organizations. If you had all 10s, you had 9 10s. How many of you had all 10s? Raise your hand. I certainly didn't. Let's see, let's do this. If you had 8 10s, raise your hand. Everybody who had 8 10s. If you had 7 10s, raise your hand. Okay, we got one with 7 10s. If you had 6 10s, raise your hand. 5 10s. 4 10s, 3 10s. All right, 2 for 3. 2 10s. Okay, we got a few more. 1 10. And we got a few more. Who had some 9s? All 9s. Some 9s. Who had some 9s? I'm getting really precise now. Some 9s, raise your hand. Okay, who had all 8s? Some 8s, raise your hand. Who had all 7s? Some 7s. Who had all 6s? All 5s, 4s, mostly 4s, 3s, mostly 3s, 2s, mostly 2s, 1s. Okay, now I didn't ask you to look around as we were calling out these numbers, but did you get a picture of what I'm talking about? And what is the picture that you got? That we have not, by and large, had lots of opportunities for multicultural experiences. Not in our homes, not in our families, not in our neighborhoods, not in our early schooling experience. Not in our current schooling experience. We haven't had a place where people talk to us about it, where people model for us what it might look like. We simply haven't had a lot of opportunities to learn a lot about multiculturalism in our lives, in our organizations, in our society. And so it's always important for me to take a moment and notice that we're asking each other, and history is asking of us, to do something that really is completely new and different, that we have not seen done any place before. Now, the fact is, none of us, as far as I could tell, had all zeros. We've had some experience with it. We have some ideas about what it could look like. And we also had some notions in our mind that we used to rate the level of multiculturalism of those organizations. In other words, we do have a vision. We know what it is we're looking for, even though we didn't have it as we came along. And so part of our task at this historical moment is to take that vision that we have and take some time working with each other and figure out how to concretize it. How do we concretize it? Well, we start with our own personal assessment. We notice that there are certain gaps in our experience, which means that there are certain gaps in our database. There's certain gaps in our awareness base. And we know it's not our fault. We don't take personal responsibility for what happened in the past because this society is not one of our creation. It is an inheritance to us from our ancestors. We do take responsibility for this moment on. And we say, though I have not had in the past a chance to learn these kinds of things, have these kinds of experiences, I can begin a process of creating opportunities for my own learning in the future. And so I do take full and complete responsibility for my future, for the future of this organization, for the future of this society. And we make a concerted plan that says, my own personal growth and development plan is as follows. These are the places that I want to go. These are the kinds of things that I want to learn about. These are some of the relationships that I've not had a chance to develop. At the University of Massachusetts, I teach a course, Education for Cultural Understanding, that's designed for people who are going to be teachers. And one of the things that I say to them is that because we can't teach what we don't know, and you haven't had a lot of opportunities to have multicultural experiences, and this is where you develop this kind of awareness, sensitivity, and understanding, one of the things that you need to do is to have some multicultural experiences. So your assignment is to go out and find somebody from a different cultural, ethnic, racial background than yourself and have an experience with them. They say, what? You mean just go out and walk up to somebody and say, hello, my name is, and I want to get to know you? And I say, yes, do that. They say, well, isn't it a little odd? I mean, what if the person says, you want to get to know me just because I'm black or just because I'm whatever I am? And I say, well, yeah, do that. Because think of all the years when we've avoided doing it just because they were black or just because they were white or just because they were whatever they were. And so now we're simply reversing that a little bit, contradicting the pattern that got given to us by the society and just doing the opposite. Instead of avoiding getting to know them because they are a person of color, we're going to make sure we get to know them because they're a person of color. And certainly it will go against the grain of the socialization that we have gotten, of the training that we have gotten, but it will certainly move our multicultural understanding along significantly. We will learn things that we simply won't learn reading a book. And it is that kind of understanding and awareness and sensitivity that we then bring to the organization to assist the organization in figuring out how to make this transition. The organization is in transition from being monocultural to being multicultural. This means that the organization necessarily needs to pay attention to a number of issues. But the organization is only able to do it as we can bring increased awareness and understanding about these issues to it as personal participants in the organization. So let me ask you to do something else. Think for a moment about one goal for multicultural learning that you would like to set for yourself and tell your neighbor what it is. Turn to the person sitting next to you and say, this is one goal that I have for multicultural learning for myself for the next 6-week period. Take a minute and do that now. one goal that you would like to set for yourself for multicultural learning for the next period of time, for the next 6-week period. If you don't have a partner, let us find you a partner. Let's get you two together so you can have somebody to talk to. And let's see, let's find you a partner. Here's someone right here. Come over and talk with them so you can have someone to talk to. Let's get you a partner. There, yes, there's someone right behind you so you can talk to them. Tell them your goal for multicultural learning for the next period of time. Okay, I would like to encourage you to continue this dialogue once the evening is done. But the point that I want to emphasize for us here now is that the business of managing the transition from being a monocultural to being a multicultural organization is everybody's business. It's not the business of the Affirmative Action Office, or the business of the Human Relations Committee, or the business of the Committee on Equality, or the business of I forgot the other committees. You see, one of the difficulties that many organizations get into is in saying, well, we've got that committee over there and they'll take care of it. And so the rest of us can carry on with business as usual. And of course, it doesn't happen. The business of making an organization multicultural belongs to every member of the organization. Every member of the organization has to take some personal responsibility for making that happen. And in order for us each to individually fulfill our personal responsibility for making it happen, we have to set some goals for ourselves. What did the Cheshire Cat, was it the Cheshire Cat spoke to Alice? Said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And having some goals gives us a way to connect into the vision, gives us a way to figure out how to make the vision concrete and specific, how to make it real. And that's part of what we are about, is how to make that vision real. It's a wonderful vision that we've had. It's part of our heritage, yes, and it's wonderful, but we get the task of making it real, making it practical day by day in our lives, in our organization. Now, there are some things that the organization will need to be able to do, given the energy and the commitment that we're able to bring to it. We know that an organization in the transition from being monocultural to being multicultural, and by that I mean an organization that is, A, seeking to be inclusive in terms of numbers, that is, including many different kinds of people in the organization, focusing on race and ethnicity, focusing on gender, focusing on age, focusing on class, focusing on sexual orientation, focusing on physical ability, focusing on language, focusing on a variety of factors which have previously been used to exclude people from the organization. And the organization is now making a concerted effort to ensure that this diversity of people are included. And I also mean to say an organization that not only focuses on including these people, but including them so that they can participate from a position of equity. We know that it is possible to have an organization where there are many different kinds of people, but where they have to come in and participate according to the old model, where they have to come in and participate according to the old standards, according to the old ethic. And so what we have here is a monocultural organization with a diversity of people in it. And we're not talking about creating a monocultural organization with a diversity of people in it. We're actually talking about creating a multicultural organization where the needs and the aspirations and the goals and the values of these many different kinds of people are spoken to, are responded to, are attended to by the organization. Where when we read the mission statement of the organization, we get some clues about the sensitivity that the organization brings to this diversity of people. When we look at the leadership of the organization, we see that there are a diversity of these people in positions of leadership and centrality and authority in the organization. When we see who has power, who has access to information, who has access to resources, and when we see where the organization puts its resources, we get a clear message that this is an organization committed to diversity, to multiculturalism. When I talk about a multicultural organization, I'm talking about one where there are many opportunities for people to talk about the issue, where we don't assume that after these many years of exclusion, how many years ago was it that this was basically and predominantly, by design, a white university? Just a generation ago. Just a generation ago. And we won't assume that suddenly, one generation later, we'll say, y'all come, and assume that we're now going to be one big happy family. Where the organization recognizes that history has its consequences, and the organization takes a responsibility to attend to the consequences of our historicity. I mean, the reality is we are a society that has lived divided from itself. We've been divided by race. We've been divided by gender. We've been divided by class. We've been divided in any number of ways, and that division has left its toll on us. We have to figure out what are the guidelines for interacting across racial boundaries, across religious boundaries, across gender boundaries. We have to figure those things out. And an organization that aims toward multiculturalism, for me, is one which seeks to make opportunities available for people to attend to historicity, for people to talk about what are the issues, for people to talk about what has gone well, and also to talk about what are the difficulties we face today. And how shall we, as a collectivity in this organization, seek to respond to the difficulties that we're facing today? Yes, there are barriers. Yes, there are organizational inhibiting factors. We can name them and we can attend to them in an organized and in a concerted way. And the organization takes time and puts resources into enabling that to happen. This is the organization that I call a multicultural organization. This is the model, of course, that I'm advocating. And so we know that there are certain factors, there are certain essential elements that an organization needs to pay attention to if it's going to successfully make that transition. We know, for instance, that the organization needs to have some commitment from the leadership, because it is those people who are in positions of decision making who are going to allocate the resources. And we know that without resources, saying that we have a commitment is one thing, but seeing it happen will be something completely different. And so commitment from the leadership of the organization is essential. Conducting a needs assessment seems to be an essential step in this process. We don't just say, okay, we have this idea, and now we're going to move ahead and do it, because we have the broad outlines of the problem, but there are lots of pieces of the detail that we need to fill in for ourselves and for each other, even those of us who think we already know. There are pieces of the detail that need to be painted in. And so a comprehensive needs assessment needs to be done. And one of the things that a needs assessment will do for us is allow us to do something else that seems to be critical, and that is have lots of dialogue about the topic throughout many, many parts of the organization. Another thing that the needs assessment will facilitate for us is another of these essential elements in making the transition, and that is building a basis of inclusion. It does seem to be important that we not simply focus on one part of the organization or one department in the organization or focus on students, or focus on staff, or focus on, it seems to be important that every part of the organization has a chance to notice what's going on in that part of the organization, get a chance to talk about it, get a chance to participate in the development of this plan that we're going to use to move us from being a monocultural to being a multicultural organization. And they get a chance to buy in. It's a process of developing inclusion that needs to go on. And then I mentioned that we do need to have a plan. Without a plan, we sort of move out in a lot of different directions, and we dissipate a lot of energy, good energy, but which doesn't give us the results that we desire, especially in relationship to the amount of energy, effort, and resources that we put into it. And so a comprehensive plan that guides our directions and gives us all a place to hang our hats, so to speak. Let me see, how's that phrase, hang our hats? Not sure about that, but gives us all a place where we can plug into the plan and be an integral part of the institutional change effort. We also need to figure out a way to continually assess how well we're doing. How well did we include people in this process? How well did we, A, provide opportunities for people to talk about their experience, and how well did we listen? We need to have some kind of comprehensive plan that allows us as an organization to continually assess how well we're doing and feed that information into the loop so that we can continually revise our plan so that we can move ahead. It means paying attention to, as someone said, not only that we get these many different kinds of people here, but we look at what is the quality of the life experience for them once they get here. It means that this comprehensive plan takes into account, I think of the University of Massachusetts where I teach, and we talk about the job of the faculty is to do research, to teach, and to give service. And these are the three things that faculty are required to do. And even though we cannot technically, someone did this and had an interesting discussion with the union, but cannot technically say, now there is this fourth thing that you have to do. We figure out a way to build this mission of managing multiculturalism in the organization into these three things. We recognize that we're not fulfilling our job as faculty in our research if we haven't thought about these issues. We're not fulfilling our job as faculty in our teaching if we have not thought about these issues. And we're not fulfilling our job as faculty in our service if we have not thought about these issues. And so we figure out how to build attention to the plan that we have now agreed upon into every part of the organization. So I say again, we are uniquely positioned to do this. We're at the right time, we're in the right place, we're amongst the right people, we have the right idea, and we're the right ones to do it. So I will leave you, and we'll take a little bit of time for some questions and answers, but I'll leave you with a story that seems to me to characterize this next period of time for us. There's a story told about two boys in a village who were having a discussion about an old man who was reported to be very wise. And these two boys said to themselves, we're going to prove that he's not really so wise after all. Now how shall we do this? And they studied amongst themselves until they finally came up with this plan. They said, what we'll do is go into the forest and we'll catch a bird. And we'll approach the old man and we'll say, tell us, old man, what do we have in our hands? And if he can figure out what it is, then we'll ask him if it's alive or if it's dead. And if he says that the bird is alive, we will kill it, and he'll be wrong. And if he says that the bird is dead, we'll hold out the bird, and the bird will be alive, and the old man will be wrong. And in either case, the old man will be wrong, and we'll prove that he's not so wise after all. And that seemed like a good plan, and so they set up on implementing their plan. They went into the woods, they caught a bird, they approached the old man, and they said, tell us, old man, what do we have in our hands? And the old man studied, and he did finally say, you have a bird. in your hands." And then they said, with a gleam in their eyes, because they knew they had him, "Tell us, old man, is the bird alive or is the bird dead?" And the old man looked at them and said, "The bird's future is in your hands." And so I say to you, our future as a multicultural organization, as a multicultural society, is in your hands. I think I'm very glad that's true. Thank you.
We have time for quite a few questions.
Did your university develop and implement the plan that you were describing, or a plan?
My university has not implemented and developed the plan that I am describing. It has done bits and pieces, some parts very well, here and there. But my university has not yet developed a comprehensive plan for moving toward multiculturalism. My university is still in a process of learning, and we have a lot to learn. Our leadership has a lot to learn. Yes.
How do you feel, or how do you implement your plan when you have someone else?
Well, part of our plan is about, the question was, how do you implement your plan when you have so much institutional racism? And what the plan is about is trying to identify the particular places that the racism is manifested in the organization. I mean, it goes without saying that there is racism in the university, in the organization. I mean, I laughed when you spoke about my university because someone was apparently very surprised that I made a statement that there was racism at our university. But yes, this is an organization, this is a university that was developed by whites, for whites, to serve the needs, values, and aspirations of whites. And then one day looked around and said, it makes sense for us to let these other people come. Now, how do we get an organization that was developed specifically to serve the needs of one group when, at the point in history when this organization was developed, the needs of the one group were seen as being best served in opposition to the needs of the other group, to now say, let's bring this other group in and the organization will serve them equally well. Well, of course, there is racism built into the organization because there is racism built into the society. A systematic plan helps us to figure out the specific ways that that gets manifested in the organization. Does it get manifested, for instance, in the admissions process? Does it get manifested, for instance, in the search process? We just can't find one qualified. We would hire one, but we just can't find them. Does it get manifested in how people get evaluated? Does it get manifested in the fact that people of color and women get asked to serve a dual role for the organization? They get to be they get to teach physics because that's their job that they were hired for, but they also get to be on every committee that has anything to do with women, or every committee that has anything to do with people of color, or they get called on to advise the provost, the dean, the whomever about whatever issues come up. And so while they're doing all of these things, they don't have time to be over here in their office conducting the research for which they're going to be evaluated for merit, et cetera, et cetera. How does it get manifested in the organization? And a comprehensive plan gives the organization the time and the tools to identify all of this so that nobody has to take this as a personal issue. It's not personal. It got built into the organization. It does seem, I say seem because it's not really real that it does, but it seems to threaten the vested interest of certain people when we try to turn it around. A plan gives us a chance to move it, in this case, from a place where people are looking at their own personal vested interests and get a chance to look at it from an organizational perspective. And then set about, as an organization, changing those specific things. changing whatever are the organizational factors that we can identify that results in the high attrition rate of students of color, for instance. I mean, I don't know what the attrition rate is in Iowa, but if it's like other places, it's quite high. I don't know. Does anybody here know?
It's high.
It's high, right? We say we really want these students to come, we recruit them, we do whatever is necessary to get them to come, and then they don't stay. Well, we can figure that out. It's not a mysterious thing. We can figure out what it is. I was doing some interviews with some students at my university, and this student happened, I say happened, so I'm setting him up, but he's not a vastly different student from many others. This student happened to have studied physics at whatever this institute is in